Guys, you're tuning into the Hawkszone Rundown live. We are talking free agency frenzy. We are, a couple of months away, or no, not. We're in February, man. We are not a couple months away. We're 5+ weeks away. March 12th is the official start of free agency. And Bryce, it's nice now that we got that OC search out of the way and we can start talking about this because, we could talk about it, but you kind of need your OC in place to sort of make sense of, hey, maybe some potential guys might come this way because of the way, Clint's schemes are, the way he runs certain personnel. So, it's going to be kind of fun show to talk about today. Bryce has a list of guys. I have a list of guys. Guys, flood the comments and we want to hear what you guys think. Who are some of the targets you think the Seahawks might go after, or who do you want them to go after? So flood your comments in, get the super chats. We're going to make those a priority. If you get super chats in, we're definitely going to get to those ones right off the hop. So guys, before we get to all of that, and you've been watching the channel, go down, hit the sub button for us and like the videos, share the videos. All that stuff helps out the channel. So we're going to get into this right away on the other side.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me!
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Gino steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf, 20.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do it.
Are you kidding me? Trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. The circus music rolls in. Throw it with Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the Hawkszone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We are going to get right into it. Bryce, free agency preview. And we are, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to kind of get this going right away because it's going to come quick. And there's guys on that Seahawks radar already. Schneider, McDonald, now Clint Kubiak. They're figuring it out. Obviously, offense is a concern, especially with that offensive line that we just got so tired of talking about them, man. So we have a list of guys. We want to hear from you guys. It's going to be interesting to see what the Hawks do, man. But this is our time to sort of give our wish list, plus how we think things could potentially go now that Clint's in the building working alongside Mike McDonald, man. So why don't we kick it off, man? What do you think? Who are some of the targets? I know you got a list. I got a few guys. No particular order, but if you want to start with sort of biggest need, what's your outlook?
So obviously, the draft class, I've been following the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl and stuff. So I think Seattle will address some of their needs through the draft as they normally do. But I think the thing that we've got to look at with Seattle now is you cannot go moving forward with the same plan to build the offensive line, which is constantly just draft and pick up late offensive linemen off of the free agency pile. Like it's not a positive way to build this O-line. So with that being said, one of the guys that I, am going to be very interested in, especially, depending on how they start the free agency process, how much they're involved in different discussions with different guys. One of the guys first off the bat for me is Drew Dahlman, center out of the Atlanta Falcons, where he's played the last few years. Thing I like about Drew Dahlman, he's still young. He's only 26 years old. He is a very good run blocking center. And with the Kubiak system, the one thing we've heard from multiple people that have talked about it, doing my own research, if you ever look at the Mike Shanahan, the Kyle Shanahan, the Sean McVay, the center position is very crucial to how this run scheme works. They have to make sure the alignments are correct. They have more on their plate than just any average center because they're also calling protections and they're doing a lot more things. And this is how that offense works in lightening the load on the quarterback. So like last year, I think Gino did a lot of the protection setting and everything at the line of scrimmage. In Kubiak's system, they take that off the quarterback's plate and put it on the center's plate. So you have to have a center that understands what he's looking at. Drew Dahlman, the way I look at it, you're probably going to end up signing him to a multi-year deal. It's going to be a 4-year deal, probably, I figure. His rough market value is 4 years, a $46 million total. I'd say you could probably get him anywhere between 11 and 12 million a year, with about half of that 46 million guaranteed, but you're going to get yourself one of the best run blocking centers in the NFL, period, which, based on what Kubiak's offense is, it's going to be a very run-centric offense. They build off of play action, which again means you don't have to have the best pure pass blocking linemen in the league. They're going to get advantages through the play action. So for me, one of the top priorities is they need to go out and get themselves a good center. And I get that there's Olu here. I don't know if Olu's the right guy for this system just because of those question marks that I laid out with how Kubiak wants the center to take responsibility of the protection calls. So Drew Dahlman, if they sign Drew Dahlman, I'd be a very happy guy.
Yeah, no, you bring up a ton of good points there, and especially with the Kubiak system, and so sticking with the center, man, like I love Drew Dahlman at center. I think another guy that could be a potential is Ryan Kelly from the Colts. Pro Bowler in 23, riddled with some injuries last year, but again, 9-year vet. So, you're talking about a stable piece there as well. So I'm not sure exactly, the numbers where you could get Kelly, but I think, again, I think with Kubiak, we talk about guards. Potentially, this could be the number one target on that offensive line, could be the center spot. And, with a guy like Kelly, it's you just have that, what you're going to get. And I think you mentioned Olu, and we saw a flash of Jalen Sundell, which, is promising, right? But again, do you want those guys starting with the way Kubiak likes to do things? And so I think I would be surprised if they don't go after a center. I think in free agency, one of these guys, and then at least you just have that mainstay there. And hopefully, you sign these guys. It's not this revolving 1-year window here that we've been seeing the last 10, 11 years. And it just have some stability there, right? That's more importantly than anything. So that's my first guy. What's your take on Kelly?
So there's a couple things for Ryan Kelly with me. You're probably going to get Kelly as one of the cheaper guys on the market. I think in some respects, you're probably paying him half of what you're going to pay Dahlman, but you're probably also giving him half the contract, right? Like, we got to remember Kelly's 31 now. He's had some knee surgeries and stuff. He had one halfway through last year's campaign. He, apparently he's potentially mulling retirement. We don't know if that's a true thing or not. But I think you could get away with a 2-year deal somewhere between 8 to 10 million per year. And you're probably, the total of the contract's probably going to be anywhere between 19 and 22 million. And you're only guaranteeing half of that. Yeah. So again, I think Kelly's a fine center, but then you're still going to be looking for that potential center of the future or the long haul, more or less. And that's where I think if they're going to go and they're going to spend money and say they miss out on a big time guard, I think you can get away with, if you get a really good center in here, like a Drew Dahlman, where you're going to get a guy that's 26. So by the time his contract would end, if you gave him a 4-year deal, he's at the age Ryan Kelly currently is. I think Kelly should be option B maybe in that situation if you're going to go out and get a free agent center. But I do like him. He does bring a lot to the table. He's been very productive in his NFL career. It's just for me, it's the age, the mulling of retirement, and it's the knee injury last year. What's he going to look at? And you look at last year, we took a guy that came back from a knee injury halfway through the season, going through some stuff and not being able to play up to what he wanted to. He called it a career. So both are good options. I just think if you're John Schneider and you're trying to make a splash and you miss out on a Trey Smith, then I think you're going after a Drew Dahlman.
What do you think their strategies, if you're into John Schneider's head right now? Do you think, okay, if they're looking at, you think they're trying to make the splash at guard first, and then, okay, if not, let's go get a Dahlman and pay him? Or do you think, because of, like we just mentioned, how Kubiak likes to run his system, they're saying, you know what, we can go get a Drew Dahlman and pay him because we're gonna free up some money, and then whatever, we'll kind of maybe get a mid-tier guard or address it in the draft again. Which order do you think they're sort of looking at? Do you think they'll go guard and then center, or you really think they say, hey, we can just solidify this center right now and go get our guy?
I think It's going to be interesting because I think it's going to really depend on the combine and where they're going to get a vibe of where some of these guard prospects are going to go, like a Gray Zabel, a Miles Frazier, some of these guys that had really good Senior Bowl weeks. They're going to be really interesting because, like, I think Gray Zabel, watching him at Senior Bowl, he's definitely played himself into the first round. I don't know if he's mid or upper first round. I think he could be mid and lower, where he's played himself into the back end of it. So now that becomes the question, like, do you think you can trade back potentially in the first round from pick 18 to somewhere in the 20s and pick yourself up a Gray Zabel? And if that's the case, then I think you go after center as your top priority first and get yourself a really solid guy in here that can run the Kubiak system. Again, Zach Robinson was the offensive coordinator for Atlanta, a guy out of the McVay tree, a guy that's used to running the wide zone system. So that helps with Drew Dahlman's adjustment to Kubiak's system, as he already basically kind of knows it and has run it for the first bit of his career here. So I think that's what's going to be the ultimate conversation with free agency and everything hitting is, okay, what is the talk around Indianapolis during the combine? Where do they think some of these, good guard prospects are going? And then if they think, okay, look, if there's a chance we can get one of, these guys in the later first round, then I think the conversation pivots to, okay, what are we doing to address the center position? Because we know how crucial it is to Kubiak's offense.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Let's move over to your next guy.
Okay, so my next guy on the list is actually a guard. And this is one for me where, I would love to see if Seattle did decide to pivot to guard. Mekhi Becton. Yeah. Lots of people have talked about Mekhi Becton. For me, the reason why I really like him is he's just nasty. He is going to, push people around. He's a young player still. He's only 25. He'll be 26 as the season starts. And I don't think, again, we're not talking about a Trace Smith level of, work. He hasn't put that much work in at the guard position. He doesn't have a huge kind of resume of success. He had to pivot to guard when he got to Philadelphia, and he's done well this year. He's not someone that you're looking to, and he's going to be, potentially a stalwart pass protector. But if you put him at right guard next to, say, Abe Lucas, you've got a pretty menacing side. And again, he's agile enough to move, but, I don't know if he's in the long-term plans for the Eagles. Potentially, they do have some other pieces there that they may want to, get into the lineup. And the thing for me is, again, you're not, I don't think, having to break the bank to sign Mekhi Becton. He's also not going to be a last-minute pivot guy. You're going to have to get him in wave 1 or wave 2 of free agency. And, I look at it and you could get him for somewhere, I think, between, 2 to 3 years, between 27 and 30 million. You're paying half of that. So anywhere between 15 million for the half of the contract. Your probably average salary is going to be about 9 million, but you can probably lay some incentives in there, right? Like you make a Pro Bowl or you start so many games or whatever, and it bumps that salary up, but it also ends up being team friendly in the back end for Seattle. So for me, Mekhi Becton would be a good guard. If you came out of free agency with Drew Dahlman and Mekhi Becton, and you can still go into the draft and potentially get a Gray Zabel or some of these guys to, you've now started to do what the Philadelphia Eagles have done so well for so many years is you've got some starters, but you've also got guys in the reserves that you can train up and get going so that if it comes to a point where, hey, you know what, Mekhi Becton's up, he's playing okay, but we've got someone in, a Gray Zabel or someone in the wings, we can then move on from Mekhi Becton and put in our draft pick from a year or two ago that is now developed into a starting caliber player.
Yeah, no, that's a great point we just made here at the end, because you look at what Seattle's done. Like you look at the last draft, we did accumulate some guards, right? LaMea, Christian Haynes, we got some young guys, but we had to insert them. Jarrell, we had to insert them. They all played meaningful minutes, right? Where it's like this year, if you go get a Mekhi Becton, you go get a Ryan Kelly, the veterans you could put on the line. Now the Olus, the Sundells, they can develop. Even if Ryan Kelly was in this building for, like you said, if it was a 2-year contract, well, then you got, if Olu's still in this roster, he has time to develop. He doesn't have to get thrown in the fire because, Connor Williams retired or whatever. I mean, we tried to throw that Connor Williams together right at the end, right? I mean, John's just like, oh yeah, grab him. So it's we're getting tired of just like scrambling around and trying to put pieces together at the very end. And then, okay, let's create an O-line now, new center every single season. Like it just, that's not the right recipe here. You just mentioned Philly. They build their team trenches out. Like that's take some notes there, and might not do it as well, but at least, like you said, you might have to go get this kid, the first or second wave, not at the end, man. Like he won't be there. So I hope they do that. That would be an awesome pickup, man. That would just be exciting to see. That first wave, we go get a guard, right? And then we'll go to the next guy here, and I think he's obviously on your list too. But this is more of I think a wish list. This would be a guy that you want to make a splash, go make a splash. Trey Smith, right? KC, man, like you're gonna have to pay this guy a lot of money. But again, we could really say, even though you could say, well, we have problems on both sides, but I think it'd be safe to say your guard issue is solved, and at least you got one side now you can really focus on. And if you have to bring in another guy that, I won't call him bargain basement, but maybe LaMea, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like maybe you just don't have to rely on those two. Just having two holes is wrong. But if you had that center, if you had to say a Ryan Kelly and then you went out and made a massive splash, I mean, man, would you be feeling good? You'd be feeling good. And then you got one sort of hole that you got to kind of plug up. Like, man, would that ever feel good? And coming in with Clint Kubiak, this is, guys, this is more of, a wish list. I'd be so surprised if he was in Seattle. But hey, man, if it's all about, if John's hearing all the things throughout the season about, hey, you got to make a splash and change the philosophy, this would be it.
No, it would be it. The thing for me, though, when I look at it is, we know Seattle's got to make room, obviously, with getting rid of some guys to go for, to create some cap space. Trey Smith would essentially eat up most of whatever you're able to do in free agency.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, if they somehow made the Trey Smith thing work, I'm not going to complain that we've gone out and got a top-level guard. The thing I look at, though, is you're probably looking at a 4-year, 5-year deal. You're looking at anywhere between $80 and $82 million total. You're looking at 50 of it guaranteed. You're looking at like 20.5, 21 per year. That's a substantial commitment there, and you still potentially have to sign or re-sign Charles Cross in a year. You're going to have to talk about Abe Lucas at the end of this season, potentially. Like, you got some guys coming up for extensions. So now you really have trying to figure out how are you building this O-line, because you don't want to lose both your bookend tackles potentially. Yes, the guard position is important. Again, this is more of a wish from both of us that somehow the Trey Smith, if Trey Smith's number came in less than that, which I highly, highly doubt, great. But I don't think it's something that's a realistic option for Seattle, where we look at some of the other guys on this list. I think, like a Mekhi Becton, you're probably looking at that being more of a realistic goal. But again, I'm not going to complain if Trey Smith somehow ends up in neon green and blue next season, and he's protecting, whoever our quarterback is and helping create a functioning offensive line.
Yeah. I think the point is just, do switch it up. Do not wait till the end of free agency, and don't rely so heavy. Like, that's the thing. I don't think he's going to do it. I think he's Trey Smith. I think that we will see a name here, and then you sort of dealt with that leading into the draft, right? And then if you want to build on that and go get another guard, then that's great. But at least we're not going into the draft feeling like, man, no, we got still two big holes at this guard spot, and then we better figure it out now in the draft. I just don't see that being a good strategy, especially what we've been seeing year in and year out. So yeah, man, why don't we move to the next guy, man? Who's another guy on your list here?
Okay, so another guy on my list, opposite side of the ball. I think a guy that you could potentially look at, depending what happens with the edges on our team, and potentially who Seattle looks at as maybe a guy that comes in. But I'm going to throw this name out there, Khalil Mack. He's potentially going to be a guy. And again, this is more of I doubt this realistically happens, because I think Mack will still garner some decent money. But if somehow he doesn't, I think, he's an older player. He's not the same guy that we saw in Vegas or Chicago.
Yeah.
His kind of production's going down a bit. I think there's a chance you could potentially bring him in, and I think he'd fit what Mike McDonald wants to do. He's reliable with not being injured, and that's the one thing I think it'll be interesting. This move or an edge addition in free agency for me is very much related to what they do with Chenna Nwosu. Do they restructure Chenna's deal due to his injury history as of late? Do they lessen that cap hit, or do they cut Chenna straight up? And I know a lot of people think that's crazy. I don't think it's as crazy because of the fact Chenna hasn't been able to stay on the field. Now, you could pivot to a Khalil Mack off of that if you really wanted to. Again, this is a guy that, if somehow it worked out money-wise and you're able to bring in a proven pass rusher that still is producing, great. And I don't think you'd have to give him a long-term deal. This would be more of a, hey, we're going to go get a guy that's going to help, again, be more of that when I've talked about in the past, a little bit of that spice added to the recipe on the defensive side to kind of push it up to that elite level. I don't know if it's realistic, but it's just an interesting player to look at in the free agency realm of the edge players right now that I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens for Khalil Mack.
Yeah, he's definitely a name that everyone's going to recognize. That's for sure. Like you said, you're not going to get the same guy, but be interested. I agree 100% with Draymond Jones probably gone, and then Chenna's a question mark, man. I don't know if some people, but yeah, man, I wouldn't be surprised. He just can't stay on the field, man. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did make that move. But sticking with the edge, the guy on my list is Josh Sweat. I think edge is not a concern, but something that we have to add depth, and we have to have something more there, I think. So I think just Sweat, being a free agent, I think with Philly, he was on a 3-year, $42 million deal. So it'd be interesting to see where you could get him there. But you look at who we have at edge right now, guys that we like, but you got to add there. You got to keep adding. So I think Sweat could be a guy that would fit in nicely here, but it all comes down to, for sure, Chenna. So I think that's kind of more of a wait and see here. But yeah, that's a guy I like. So yeah.
I think Sweat's an interesting one. He's younger than Khalil Mack, obviously. Yeah. I think with him, again, I think you're going 50 mil for a total value of contract. You're probably guaranteeing half, above half of that. You're probably guaranteeing at least 30 to 32 million. Yeah. He's probably going to be an average of 16 to 18 million a year over a 3-year deal potentially. But again, that's the one thing I will say about our edge group is we need to see, I still think it needs to see a jump from Mafe, a jump from Hall.
That's what I'm saying.
In their pass rushing ability.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing we don't really have. Like, our edge group is good. I'm not going to say it's bad. I really like what Derek Hall's jump was last year. I think Boy Mafe still has more, and he hasn't tapped into it.
Yeah.
Chenna's the interesting one just due to, injury history and everything, but they don't really have a guy you can look at and go like, hey, if it's third and, +7 and they're in a passing situation, there's over a 50% chance our guy's potentially going to get into the backfield and create some sort of pressure. They need more of that pass rusher. And there's some guys in this draft class, Mike Green being one of them, Sherman Stewart, some of these other guys I think are going to be potential guys that are going to make some money for themselves through the draft process and have done well at Senior Bowl. I'm going to be interested to see if Seattle takes one. I think there's a chance, and I'll say this now, I think there's a chance Seattle's first draft pick may be an edge player, like, someone in that group, and they may punt to round 2 for an offensive lineman potentially. So it'll be an interesting discussion point, but these are just some guys that I look at, from the edge class, and there's one more I'll throw in here too, just as another name that's, I think, a guy you could probably get on a cheaper deal too, just because he, again, is Chase Young. Chase Young has kind of fallen off since his time in Washington. You remember he was a top pick.
Yep.
Again, I think he's a guy that you could get. He's young still. His prove-it deal with the Saints didn't really work. We talk about the connection with Kubiak. I know it's on the other side, but sometimes even coaches going that way can turn the new organization they're with onto a player. He was around Chase Young. Maybe he's got some glowing reviews of how the kid worked. I think, if you brought him in, again, he's another guy that I think can get to the quarterback. You don't have to pay him a lot. I think it would be like a 2-year deal between 15 and 18 million per year. You're probably looking at a total of 30 to 35 million total contract with maybe again, between 17 and 20 million guaranteed. And again, he's a guy you could incentive base it. Hey, if you get over double-digit sacks, here's an extra 2 million on your contract. Or if you start and play a certain amount of the snaps, here's another million or two for your contract. That's where I think you can look, like how we've treated offensive line in the past couple of years or for a while now. I think you can look to get upside players more now that you've got Mike McDonald in here, especially on the edge. You've got some guys that are already stable players that you're going to get production out of in Derek Hall, Boye Mafe. You can go and take a swing on a Chase Young and say, great, if it hits, awesome. If it doesn't hit, okay, we got some guys in the draft we can look at too. So Chase Young's another name I think that could be an interesting one. So
yeah, and real quick, when you touch on the draft that you think first round, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. It's the same thing. You know, our first pick last year was Byron Murphy. You know, last year people were screaming for O-line too. But you know how it is. It doesn't pan out like you just put a bunch of rookies on the O-line and things are going to be all good. And I think that's why you could potentially see that again, especially if we deal with our issues in free agency. That's the thing. Then you can, like you said, wait to the later rounds to add depth to the O-line, right? I mean, look at our third round pick last year, Christian Haynes. A project, you could say at this point, right? You could say, well, it was body at NFL level, but first year, we picked him in the third round, so the expectations were a little higher. But yeah, that's what it is. So if you deal with it, you go get some of the guys we mentioned. Maybe not Trey Smith, but the realistic guys that we mentioned. Then you're going into the draft, and Seahawks fans and everyone else aren't like, oh, O-line. Like, you don't even have to. That won't even be the thought process, I think, going in. If you have a center that you think that Clint Kubiak fits right in his system and a guard, I mean, are we even thinking O-line now the first round? Unless there's just an absolute stud. But other than that, let's address some other needs, right?
So I'm just going to throw this up here. We got a super chat in from Tony Bagel Donuts. Keep up the good work, guys. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. And guys,
Tony.
Super chats get priority in the chat. So if you feel like you want to give us one of those, we really appreciate it. Ryan, who's your next guy you want us to talk about here on this free agency primer?
You know what? It's funny, man, because last year we were like, man, this corner room's so deep. Like we don't have to worry about corner for, I don't know, for maybe a few years to go, right? And then you saw the deficiencies with the Trey Brown, injuries crept up, but just, man, some of the stuff that in coverage just wasn't looking good with him. And then all of a sudden we're like, okay, well, he probably won't be back. And he definitely won't be back. And then obviously, okay, let's see how Woolen does under Mike McDonald. And then there was the off-field issues and just, his mental side of his game. Maybe this is what we're getting out of the fifth round pick. And maybe this is who he is, an athletic freak, but just won't put it all together. Question mark. Are the two guys who drafted, one didn't even make the team, and Pritchett, the jury's still out. So now you're left with Spoon, who's not going anywhere, and Josh Jobe that we picked up last year, who looks like we'll easily get him back. But so now you're looking like, hey, this is getting a little thin, because I think Woolen will be back, but again, could be just let's see what we can get out of him another year. So if, say, Woolen's only here for another year, unless he just shows something different, I think you might have to address it. So one guy I was looking at was, now it could get confusing, but Byron Murphy, cornerback from the Vikings. He's got a nose for the ball. And that Minnesota defense looked great, and he's a versatile player, right? So for me, I think corner is I think you might have to address it. So that would be a guy. That's a guy on my list right there, Byron Murphy.
Yeah, I think Byron Murphy's an interesting one. I wonder if the Vikings let him out of the building because they don't have a lot of corner depth there.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see, what they decide to do there. But I think cornerback is a sneaky need for Seattle. We traded away Mike Jack last year. One of our, James didn't even make it out of camp on the roster. Nehemiah Pritchett, who's someone I was intrigued by, struggled throughout the year, and Trey Brown struggled as well. And I don't think Trey Brown will be back. I think they're going to move on from Trey Brown. So, no, I could definitely see a Byron Murphy. And again, he gives you that flexibility to allow Witherspoon not to solely have to play nickel all the time and off the edge. You bring in a guy that can do that as well. So I think he's definitely an intriguing one for sure. For me, I'll stick in the same room. I've got Nate Hobbs.
Nice.
And he's intriguing to me as he's more of a slot corner than he is an outside, but he's actually played quite well for Vegas. Like he's a guy, again, this isn't a guy you're going to have to pay a lot of money to. Like Nate Hobbs can be a guy you get wave 3, wave 4 free agency. He had a really strong rookie campaign, but he's kind of struggled a little bit since then. He's been up and down, but he can play outside. He's 6'1". He's almost 200 pounds, but he hasn't been asked to do that a lot in Vegas. They've had him more play as the slot, and he's really good coming up off the edge, making tackles. He's also really a great blitzer off the edge. So, if I'm looking for a guy to come in, I don't necessarily know if I'm looking for an outside corner. I think you might address an outside corner through the draft potentially. But if I'm looking for a guy that I can come in to free up Spoon that might be able to make an impact, still give me the flexibility to bump him out, I think Nate Hobbs for like maybe a total of a $4 million deal, like a 1 year, $4 million kind of prove it deal, could be interesting. And again, he's only 26. Like he'll be 26 this season. So you're still getting a young guy that if he plays well, and say Josh Jobe takes a step back, but you really like what Nate Hobbs has done, you might be able to re-up Nate Hobbs on a 2 or 3 year deal, and it's still not going to cost you an arm and a leg at the end of the season.
Yeah, no, that would be a nice pickup. But I agree. I think somebody like we talked about, coming on, you can go inside, freeing up Spoon. I think that's the key. I think we both sort of want to see him playing outside a little more. I think I don't know. I just want to see him, what he can do when he's out there more than just in the slot there. So great. That'd be a great pickup as well, man. Another guy for me, and we talk about Clint Kubiak and how he runs his offense, right? A lot of 12 personnel and his history with tight ends. Going back to, well, this is sort of a tough one, but when he was in San Francisco, Kittle over 1,000, but then he got a lot out of his tight ends in Minnesota and used them a lot, like focal points. So yeah, Juwan Johnson converted wideout to tight end, big body dude. You could probably get him on a pretty fair contract. I think what was his contract? 2 year, $12 million that he just came off of. So you look at a guy like that, familiar with Clint, and it didn't set the world on fire, but a guy that can do a few things and could kind of fit in this system, and you could probably get him on a pretty decent contract. Now you do have Noah Fant in here, but again, man, like I just not seeing enough out of him, man. So I don't know. What do you think? Is it realistic that we're going to bring in another tight end, or you think Noah's going to be here? Or do you think that's a guy that will be off the stars? I know we talked about it. What's your thoughts on Johnson here? Just the Kubiak familiarity too, right?
I think there's a very high chance Juwan Johnson could be a Seattle Seahawk. Just Kubiak's kind of style that he likes. And here's the issue with Noah Fant and the 12 personnel they like to run. You look at, like, for example, the 49ers. They've ran, an all-around guy in a George Kittle type that can block and catch. And then they have more of a pure blocker. And then they usually have some sort of move tight end and H-back where they've had Kyle Juszczyk do that for the last few years. I think Juwan Johnson has some viability here as a option for Seattle. I don't know if Noah Fant does. And I think just based on Noah Fant's contract, I think they may want to get out of his contract and look at moving to a different, tight end group altogether featuring AJ Barner. I think AJ Barner will probably has a good shot to be tight end 1 next year. Again, I look at his kind of what he is, for Juwan Johnson. He gives you a large catch radius. Like, the dude's a big dude. He's still under 30, which is a good thing. He's a really good red zone threat. And that's the one thing I'll say about Kubiak's offense that is very effective in the red zone, especially using the tight ends. He's not going to be a great blocker. He's not.
No.
So that's one thing that, you kind of got to weigh the pros and cons. Like, okay, are you really getting a better deal if you keep Noah Fant for one more year, or if you sign Juwan Johnson? I think you probably signed Juwan Johnson just because of his familiarity with the system. Right. He brings a guy for Kubiak who knows it. He also is going to be your critical third down guy. And that's the one thing I think a lot of people have to understand with the Seahawks offense now. The Kubiak offense is very 12, 13 personnel heavy. They do run 11 personnel, but not as much as what we saw this year. They're going to be more, two receivers. So you're going to see more JSN and DK. Mm-hmm. So your third target may not be, a third receiver. It might be a Juwan Johnson or an AJ Barner as your third tight end because of how they run their 12 personnel. So I'd be intrigued with Juwan Johnson. I think there's a good chance he may be a guy that ends up, coming to Seattle. And just, he basically last year, over the past 4 seasons, he's had 18 touchdowns, ranks 8th among tight ends in the NFL, and his 9-yard average of depth of target ranks 5th. Wow. He's not just a check down guy. Like, he can vertically stretch the field down the seam for you, which with this too high shell defense now in the NFL is a huge thing. So, no, I'd be intrigued by Juwan Johnson for sure.
It's funny when you mention the, the 2 wide receivers and the 12 personnel and 2 tight end sets. That's why I'm not. It's interesting, and we talked about at the beginning of the show that, okay, now that the OC search is over, we can sort of, little easier to maybe focus on some guys, because a receiver is not really on the list for me, like, because that third receiver, if it's more than likely Tyler's not here, you're more focused on the tight end, right? So if you're going to run a lot of that, because I think Kubiak, 30% rate run 12 personnel, right?
Yeah,
so
they run it quite a fair bit.
So you look at that, and then with the OC search over, say, okay, well, if that's what he runs, then you're going to see a lot more of just sort of JSN, DK, and then, whoever your tight ends are or whatever, right? So the Noah Fant thing's interesting. But yeah, I agree. The Juwan Johnson thing could be, the red zone threat, but also the things you mentioned and just the familiarity. But who knows? Maybe they just decide to roll with Noah. They might like some things with him, but yeah. Why don't we get over to one of your guys?
So one of my guys here, and I noticed it in our chat, someone kind of asked about, hey, what about the interior of our defense? Like, who are some guys that are kind of interesting? So one guy for me that I find quite interesting is, and I'll put it up here on the ticker here, is BJ Hill out of Cincinnati. Again, a guy I don't think, 2-year deal probably. He's been very good as an interior D lineman for the Bengals. He, to me, is a guy, he's going to be 30 at the start of next year. So again, he's a little bit on the older side, which where I think you can get away with a shorter deal, but the Bengals are going to have to make cap space if they're going to keep Jamar Chase and they're going to try and keep T. Higgins. I think it'll make it tough for them to retain Hill. And I like what Hill does. Again, we're talking about a guy that when you look at, BJ Hill, he's 6'3", 330 or 311. He's been a pretty stout piece for that interior of that Bengals defensive line. He can bring a little bit in the pass rush game, but he's more going to be a guy that you're going to have in there for rundowns. I'm okay with that. And again, that frees up Byron Murphy. It frees up Leonard Williams. He can be a movable chess piece for you.
Yeah.
And he gives you some size in there. So he's a guy that, again, I think Seattle might be interested in, just to take that, kind of veteran interior D lineman that they like to do. Jonathan Hankins didn't really work out well this year. I think they might go with someone's a little bit more athletic in the middle, and BJ Hill's someone I think that could fit that bill for them.
Yeah, that I like that. Who's the other guy? You had another guy, former Hawk that also on your list with Puna
Ford. I think Puna would be an interesting guy to bring back potentially, and
he would be.
Again, we'll touch on it at the end of us going through some of the people that aren't on, or players that aren't on the Seahawks roster. Some guys that we think Seattle needs to re-sign. But Puna Ford, again, I think you could get him on a 1-year deal, a prove-it deal. Like,
right.
That's kind of what he's been playing on since he's left. Again, he's around the same age as BJ Hill, but Puna had a pretty good year down in LA this year for the Chargers. He was a pretty disruptive force, and I think, again, in Mike McDonald's system, I think it'll ask him to do things he's more comfortable with, and I think he could be, again, someone that gives you a really good run defender on the interior with maybe the odd time of some disruptive pass pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, no, and I liked it when Puna was here, man. So that would be interesting. Get him on a 1 year cheap, just get him in here, more depth. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. So, we're covering a lot of ground here with different guys. Just looking here. Okay, we talked about this. This is just kind of funny. This is Mookie. We do the bi-weekly segment, Pulse of the Hawks. So he loves the idea that you're gonna have a good percentage of Byron Murphy on the field at one time. So the only thing for me that could start getting a little confusing, but two good players, two good Byron Murphys. So that would be also a bonus there. So Mookie Alexander, guys, make sure Mookie's always on every second Monday that we do Pulse Hawks, so always chiming in and keeping things light. So hey, look, why don't we look? We got a couple more guys on this list. You roll down, and I know this is going to start heating up conversation wise, and everybody's got their take, and there's just going to be more and more takes. But man, the quarterback position, right? There's a couple guys out there right now. Well, there's a few guys out there, but a guy that we've talked about on our show, a lot of other shows have talked about it, and he had not a great end to his real breakout season, and that's Sam Darnold. He's a guy that's out there. He's not on my top, like when we talked off air, say, okay, bring a top 5. He wouldn't be a top 5 per se, because I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if Geno left, or if they cut him or they trade him, whatever. And sure, Sam Darnold, let's give it a run, right? Because I look at these guys that they're bridge guys. They would just kind of fall in line what Geno's doing. It's not like, hey, we bring in Sam. He's our future answer to quarterback. It would just be like, okay, guy had a great regular season. Maybe he can do things with Clint. And we can compete. You could still really compete with Sam Darnold. So that would be sort of, I'd be fine with it. But I'm not saying, hey, we need this guy. I think Geno, I think you and I agree, if that works out, it would be similar. But yeah, what's your take?
It'll be interesting with Sam Darnold. I think he's going to get what Baker got when he first kind of went over to a Baker type deal when he got to Tampa.
Right.
And that's kind of what I've been hearing throughout the NFL wavelength, is that's what most executives expect him to get. The thing that's interesting is, again, Darnold played in San Francisco when Kubiak was the passing game coordinator there. There is a little bit of a history. Again, this is all going to depend on what Seattle talks go with Geno, and that'll start up between now and the Combine. And the Combine's kind of this unofficial talk period for agents to garner what's going on. And I think Seattle's got a hard number. I have a hard number that I don't think they can go above with Geno, and it's not letting him play on the current deal. For me, I think you may walk away from Geno if he wants anything above 35 or 37 million. Like 37 million a year is my hard cap for Geno Smith on what I'd be willing to give him in an extension per year. You got to look at like age. You got to look at the last couple of years with injuries. I know he's been playing behind a battle line, but he's missed a couple of games here. So that might be something Seattle does where they go, hey, look, Geno, this is our number. Take it or leave it kind of a thing, but we're going to let you go out and have your agent talk to, say, the Raiders or talk to the Browns or somebody. And if you can garner them to make a trade and have a deal in place for you, great. And Seattle pivots. And Sam Darnold could be a pivot for that. They could look at it and go, hey, we're getting a guy that's almost, 8 years, 7 years younger. We can sign him to a deal for 3 years or whatever it ends up being, and kick the can down the road a little bit. I still don't think that disenfranchises Seattle from taking a quarterback in the late second to fifth round in this year's draft. I think that's still a possibility. But Sam Darnold's an interesting cat for that, because we've seen what he's been able to do in this offense.
Yeah.
He's run it in Minnesota. He ran it last year in San Francisco. He's been in this type of offense, this West Coast zone run offense. So you've seen the results. Now, I know there'll be people out there who'll say, well, Geno's just as good and stuff. And That I'm not disapproving that. I think that's a very fair take. I think Geno is as good as Sam Darnold. You're just looking at age and you're looking at, what are you willing to actually pay up for Geno Smith? Because Geno may view himself as a $45 million quarterback and the Seattle Seahawks may not. So that's just something to be prepared for. And that's, I think Sam Darnold could be a pivot for Seattle.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting with the Geno talks too, because if people don't remember, Geno wanted to get a deal. He wanted to get a deal done last year. Like they were coming out. They wanted to, I think he knew like this was his time to maybe his highest value to cash in here. Like he knew, you're getting up in age. Okay, I kind of came off an inconsistent season, but I've done 2 years here. Okay, before I'm going into year 3 here, let's get a deal done. I want bigger money. And because you heard about the numbers, right? And Seattle's like, nah, we're good right now. We're good right now. So I think Seattle's got a hard number. I don't think they're going to play too much back and forth because, I think, if Geno thinks he can go get the money, then go. I mean, go to the Raiders. I mean, someone might overpay him, but I don't want it to be Seattle because we have other needs to address. This guy's not a long-term quarterback. I don't think we're going to build a team strong enough around him if he gets paid what he wants to do anything. So that's not good for us as a franchise. What's good for us is a bridge quarterback and then start drafting for the future. And like you said, you pivot to Sam, maybe something great happens. I mean, look what happened to Minnesota. They added some pieces and Sam had a great year. So I would not be upset about that. And yeah, for Geno, man, like you said, I'm cool with him at a specific number because I don't want to hinder this franchise because you're signing a 35-year-old, average, whatever you want to call him, 12 to 15 quarterback. That's fine. But that's good enough for me. And if not, hey man, good luck. Appreciate the 3 years. And we're moving on. And the other note is, people got to think back when they traded Russell Wilson. People always think, oh, we got to have, guy in the wings and what's the other guys? They didn't have a plan when they got rid of Russ. They traded Russell Wilson. Geno Smith wasn't under contract, so they just went and signed him. Like, what I'm saying is that you don't necessarily always have to have this grand plan. It's nice. It's nice if you have a Jordan Love in the wings. It's nice if that's a nice luxury, but it's not always able to do it. And we're not in that position. We talked about the years that John wasn't able to draft a guy in the last couple of years because where we were sitting in the draft. So, I think I agree. There's a number. If it's there, great. If not, then, we figure it out.
Exactly. And I think, like I'm just going to pull this one up here from Dogzilla, who's in here. Appreciate you being here. Geno does not look old. He's in terrific shape with low miles. I agree. He doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him yet. But the one thing I'll say is Father Time is undefeated in a lot of ways. Man. Yeah. The biggest thing with Geno for me is it's going to come down to value of contract. It's not that Geno is a bad quarterback. It's not that Geno, this whole thing of whether you love Geno on one side of the bell curve or you absolutely hate him. And then there's the rational group that's kind of in the middle. I'm in that rational group. If Geno comes back and it's on a $30 million a year deal, okay, great. Like that's fine for me. I think that's good value. And you can incentivize it up to 37. Okay, great. But when we're starting to talk about $40 million a year, $45 million a year, that's where for me it gets a little where I'm like, okay, what does this look like? If you're gonna go that high, how are you going to build this contract that if you somehow in the next 2 years find your QB of the future, you can get out of it without taking a massive dead cap hit on it, on a guy that could be 37 at that point. And how many teams are looking for a 37-year-old with a potential $45 million cap hit will be the real question at that point in time. So that's why I think you still have to make this a team-friendly deal as much as you can. That'll give you ways of getting out of it if you do find the next quarterback eventually in the wings. But again, I'm okay with Geno coming back. I like Geno. I have Geno's jersey. I'm very much, a pro Geno guy, but I'm also being realistic about the Seahawks franchise and what they're probably thinking in their heads about how they view this going forward over the next 5 to 10 years. So,
hey, when did you get that Geno jersey? Just curious, what year was that?
I got my Geno jersey beginning of this year. I got my Geno jersey.
Okay, well that's that. Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah,
I was just
got my
gonna say,
Geno
some
jersey.
guys get their Russ jersey and then and then the Sierra stuff happens, and then you seriously, because then
Yep.
people there was a bad taste at the end. I First of all, I love Russ now. You get over all that stuff, and Russ just so many good years in Seattle. But I agree, man, with the Geno thing. I think I like him too, but I don't think he's worth a certain amount of money. I think you can do just as good with a different bridge. Because and going back to the Geno, it's nothing to do with. I don't think he looks slow. It's nothing to do with that. I actually commented a lot this year, like
His
get him
speed
out
was there.
get him out running more. It's more that to me, it's like you said, the value. Uh, you can have your own opinions about him, but I agree with what you said. Father Time's undefeated. You can be sitting around just playing rec sports, and once a certain age hits you, you are different. So and now you're playing at the NFL level, where the best of the best, you lose half a step, or your arm goes just a little bit because you hit that age. Peyton Manning, a lot of these guys, it wasn't about, well, how much do they get smashed around. It was just like, dude, you just got old. You're 39 years old. You're just, sorry, dude. Like, sounded good when you were 36, saying, okay, I can play to. Everybody thinks they can play till Tom Brady's age now, and it's like, no,
We
it
saw what
doesn't
happened with
work.
guys like Drew Brees and Peyton. The
Yeah,
older they
yeah.
got, that really
just
started
fell,
to
man.
deteriorate.
They just fell.
Tom Brady's kind of an anomaly, but
Is an
let's go with guys that we should re-sign, Ryan. So I've got two guys that stand out to me that I think Seattle needs to re-sign. I think the obvious one. We'll both agree. And honestly, it was funny. I was having a text conversation with Dan Viens of Seahawks Forever, and he threw the name saying Jones out there. They're 100% going to, re-sign Jones, because he was talking about, I think it's Jahil Campbell, a linebacker at the Senior Bowl, and, how'd be an interesting guy. And I was like, yeah, you really think they're going to sign Jones? And my brain, when he said Jones is 100% getting re-signed, my brain went to Draymond Jones. And I'm like, hold on a second here. I'm out on Draymond. Like, you really think Seattle's going to re-sign Draymond Jones? Then I remembered in my head, because for me, I've already thought through this going, there's no way Seattle's not re-signing Ernest Jones.
He's not even on the
list.
As
a linebacker here. He's going to be a fixable core piece. And so, for me, Ernest Jones is, the first priority, like Leonard Williams was last year. And I think the second priority for me is Jarran Reed. And I know people are going to say, oh, he's getting old. Jarran Reed played really well last year and allowed a lot for what Leonard Williams was able to accomplish, because he didn't necessarily have to play early downs and wear himself down throughout the year, because Jarran Reed was so good at taking over that 3-tech role in a lot of those early down situations. So for me, those are the two guys for sure that I want to see Seattle bring back, is Jarran Reed and Ernest Jones.
Yeah, those would be my two picks too. I mean, like you said, you don't even have to mention Ernest Jones, just because once he got in this building, this defense just transformed. And you saw, like, this guy's a leader. It wasn't just about the play on the field. It's like, okay, there's something different about this guy. You almost were like, just give him a contract after the first game, like that. You saw the impact right off the hop. So yeah, and then I agree, man. Jarran Reed, not only was he a good veteran to have with, for say players like Byron Murphy in there and stuff like that, he was effective on the field last season. So definitely a bring back guy. And then, yeah, those are the two real good guys. I mean, you could talk about, Jonathan Hankins, you bring him back, but depends on the number. But other than that, man, like, there's not a lot of pressing needs. I think Ernest, they're gonna get it done. I don't think that's gonna be a question. Almost like Leonard last year. Like, it was almost like this is the number one priority, and we were pretty sure it was gonna get done. You know what I mean? And to John's credit, he got it done. So I think Ernest is not only a no-brainer, I just think it's gonna get done. So and then I think Josh Jobe, he's not unrestricted, right? So that's a guy that you could bring back, no problem. Yeah, I don't know. Other than that, man, I think it's just like, let's go get the outside guys.
Yeah, I really do. Like, there's not a lot where I look at Seattle's current free agent group that's being released in the team where I'm like, hey, like I know Josh Jobs,
Artie Burns, maybe.
Artie Burns is one, but I think
you gotta
Artie
get him on the
Burns
cheap.
again. You can get him on the cheap, and
yeah.
maybe you don't go with Artie Burns and you go with Nate Hobbs instead, right?
Totally.
That's where you would be the trade-off. The contracts, I think, would be very similar, vet minimum kind of in that range. Again, outside of that, like Josh Jobs a restricted free agent, so all Seattle has to do is tender him with a tender. So I don't think they're letting him out the building because of how well he played. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see what Seattle does with their outside free agent acquisitions, because I think there's more opportunity this year for that than maybe there has been in the past, because Seattle's done such a major job of re-signing their own free agents. And I think this is where you'll see, in some respects, how much Mike Macdonald liked the team building process prior to him getting here. Will be a very interesting thing between the next 2 years of seeing who ends up sticking on this roster and who ends up leaving, because Mike Macdonald starts to change it in his image. But I thought we could do a quick little fun pivot here, Ryan, since we'll get to some of these questions, but I've seen a lot of draft questions in the chat here. And I thought we could pivot to a quick 4-round mock draft. Just the Seahawks. We'll knock it out in 15, 20 minutes. We've seen a lot of people in here about different guys they'd be interested in. So I've got the simulator set up and we can quickly hop into it.
All right, bring it up.
All right. And guys, put in the chat some of the guys you'd be interested in the first 4 rounds for Seattle. That way we can kind of play off of that as we go. So I'll bring this up. Should be up on the screen now. Okay, so I'll take that one banner off the screen just so it doesn't block anyone's view. Give me 1 second here. There we go. And guys, don't forget, get your comments, your questions in. We'll get to them right after this. So we'll do a quick mock here. So we got our pick. We'll start the draft. We'll get all the way down to Seattle. So yeah, PFF we're using as a simulator. It's kind of changed and adjusted itself throughout. Cam Ward's off the board. Shador Sanders off the board. Travis Hunter. Abdul Carter went to Jacksonville. Will Campbell off the board early to Chicago. There we go. Everyone who's in love, Mike Green went to the worst possible situation for us. Mike Green and Nick Bosa off the edge is definitely not something I'd be too happy about. Josh Simmons, Calvin Banks, who's one of my draft favorites, and then Tyler Warren went 1 pick before us. Based on this, and I'm looking at this board here, I think we could trade back potentially, but we're not going to do a trade in this one. So pick 18, Ryan. Do you think we go offense? Do you think we go defense?
Man, I would go at this point, man. I'm going defense, man.
I'm in the same boat. Let's check out this edge class here because I think there's some really good players here set up for us still. So Mikael Williams is still there from Georgia. Shamar Stewart, Nick Scordon. There's some really good players still available. I was really impressed with Stewart this week at Senior Bowl, man. Like he made himself some money, and I think he's going to be an impactful player. So I personally like Stewart here. I know Williams is still sitting here. I don't think he'll be sitting there at this point.
Right. So
I think there's a chance
realistic.
Stewart might
let's be realistic. Let's go Stewart.
All right, we'll take Stewart. So we got Shamar Stewart here. We dealt with our edge situation. All right, so we get down to pick 50 here. Okay, so let's take a look at the guard situation because we just talked about, interior O-line play for Seattle. Tyler Booker's still there. Tate Ratledge is still there. There's some interesting guys that are there available, obviously. Now let's take a look at our O tackle, Donovan Jackson. I love Donovan Jackson because of the flexibility he gives you. He can play outside at tackle. He can kick into guard. He played left tackle this year, but he is a left guard. I think we go Donovan Jackson.
Let's go Donovan Jackson. I'll pop up the comments as we go too. I think this is sort of, some people are looking at this, say, look, it's automatic. You go into your offensive line, even if it's a reach. And I think, I get it if we didn't address it in free agency. I think, because if you just throw a bunch of rookies in there, it could be a good pick, but man, it could give us a chance to address other things. If we sign a center and a guard, then I don't think definitely don't have to reach. But I understand where people are coming from just because of how bad this interior offensive line is. So that's why I think, just looking at Dogzilla Monster, I know, hey, appreciate you on the comments, man. He's in the chat all the time. We really appreciate you. But I think where he comes from and a lot of fans come from is just, it's just been so bad.
Yeah,
but I
agreed.
think
It has been.
if we feel that if we take care of this in free agency, I think, a lot of fans might reevaluate that after, so you kind of get through free agency first and then, okay, see where we're at. And then it might change the narrative with some Hawks fans. So I just wanted to throw up that one because, I know that you hear it a lot, right? Hey, first round, just pick a – but why are we even looking at another position, Bryce? That's been, definitely a narrative.
No, 100%. And I totally get Dogzilla's annoyance with, just the fact that it hasn't been addressed, right? It hasn't been properly addressed.
Yeah.
We did take some guys last year. Christian Haynes, I think, is actually going to thrive more in the Kubiak scheme than he did in Grubbs.
Right.
But I think, we still got some young guys. So, it'll be very interesting to see how this all goes.
Yeah, you get through. Scroll down and keep looking. I think quick answer to this is, we are assuming he's here.
Yes.
So as far as addressing a receiver or whatever, it's not even a great class. So I think we're absolutely assuming he's here, especially with Kubiak. I think we talked about it, that he's got a lot of Jefferson most yards, and we're not comparing the two receivers, but yeah, that's the quick answer.
So there's still a lot of quarterbacks still left on the board here, which is great. They might start coming off. But this is kind of what I'm honestly expecting. Like,
I think this is where you're looking at
the only exception. I think he's getting pushed up, but what I've been watching here.
But if he's here in the mock, I mean, you'd have to take him if he's here. Right?
I don't know about that. I really don't, because the thing for me with Dart is I've watched him in Senior Bowl today in the game. He's underthrown a lot of deep balls. I get the appeal of what he did in practice and stuff is great, but considering Will Howard's still sitting here and Kyle McCord's still sitting here, there's still some guys I think you can get. You don't have to swing and hope on Dart. I think you can go and fill out another position here, potentially. Like tight end for me, we talked about it, is a big need in the Kubiak system. Even if we do what you said, Ryan, earlier, and sign Juwan Johnson, I think there's a more of a statement here of, okay, like, do we go out and get our tight end and oh God, I can't even say that. Elijah Arrero is still on the board. I hope I said that right. I'll get better at it. Harold Fanning Jr., there's some tight ends here. I like Elijah Arrero. He did really well at Senior Bowl. I think he's a sneaky guy, and I think he, based on his size, again, we're looking at a guy, first look, 6'4", 245. He can be a bit of your move tight end. He gives you a guy that can catch out of the, out into the actual pass concepts and stretch the field. So I think we could potentially take a tight end here.
Let's plug it in. Let's do it.
All right. We'll take our tight end here. Okay. So now we get down. So yeah, there's a bit of run on the quarterbacks. So we'll just go up here a little bit to where we were at pick 82. So right after we picked, Jalen Milroe goes off the board. We look at it. Will Howard goes off to the Jets. We come all the way down here. Riley Leonard's off the board. So now we look at it. Terrence Fergus. Okay, cool. Now, Savon Jones is an interesting late edge player. He's had a phenomenal game today in Senior Bowl. He's someone I think that could be interesting for Seattle. Okay, so now we're down here. We're now in pick round 4. Okay, now we can take a look. And there you go. Jackson Dart is the top-rated guy right now on the board.
That's a no-brainer.
It is and it isn't. Like, again, I like Dart. I look at
we're going to end up not drafting quarterback.
Well, hold on.
Does he take?
I think Kyle McCord is going to jump up the draft board. I don't think he's going to be there.
Yeah. Does he take Quinn Ewers then? Because we talked about the ties and how he's had
Quinn. I think honestly, there's a more of an argument for Kyle McCord out of the 3 guys that are left than Jackson Dart. Because realistically, I don't think Dart's here in round 4. I don't even know if McCord's here in round 4 if he continues what he's been doing in the pre-draft process. I would rather take Kyle McCord here. I think he projects a bit better in some aspects than Dart. And I'm not saying Dart's going to be a bad quarterback at the next level. It's just there's still certain things, and I'm still watching film on Dart to see if there's things that that what I saw in certain games are going to translate well. but I'm good taking a quarterback here. We're round 4. We filled a potential O-line spot. We filled an edge. We got a tight end to give Kubiak another guy. We're saying that we address guard and center in free agency. It's going to be an interesting one here. It's either Dart or McCord for me. I'm not even looking at Hewers as a guy.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna let you go at it. I mean, I like Dart, but McCord. Yeah, McCord. Let's go McCord.
Let's go McCord. Next draft, we'll see where Dart is and we'll take it. Obviously,
right.
Again, with the grades, guys, be very interesting to see. But this is where PFF has them ranked and where we took them in relation. That's where you get it. So we took, in our quick 4 round here, we got Shamar Stewart, Donovan Jackson. The board said we should have taken Carson Schlesinger. I like Carson, but I don't know if we're going to need a linebacker in round 2 like that. Got a good tight end value, and we took Kyle McCord here, and they gave us a C- for it based on where they had him and where we took him. We're a little early on it. Overall, we got a draft B grade of a B. So for a quick, draft there and what we did, I'm okay with that. Like, that to me would be a fine draft if somehow the first 4 rounds ended up like that. And again, this is with the pretense, like Ryan said earlier, we've gone out and maybe got Drew Dahlman and Mekhi Becton in free agency, and we're not stressing for an interior player on the O-line right off the bat at guard. So
yeah, no, exactly. So that's and then you address other needs. So it's gonna be interesting. So guys, don't be surprised if it gets addressed that now we don't start drafting the O-line until later on in the draft for depth purposes. So yeah, man. Hey, that was good, man. Kind of going through some guys, a lot of comments in the chats.
Let's get into a quick few of those before we wrap up here.
Yeah, let's get into 2 or 3 of them real quick. Pick one.
All right, let's go here with Thomas. Jackson Dart might be a great value, or maybe Howard, and he follows it up with, how good was McCord in Senior Bowl? So Kyle McCord did not go to Senior Bowl. He went to Shrine Bowl. And from everything with people I was talking to down there and everything I was reading as well, he lit it up. Like, he was the best quarterback down there by far. And in that same Shrine Bowl week, Shedeur Sanders was down there. And Kyle McCord did better than him in the practice sessions and everything, to the point where Kyle McCord didn't play in the game because he had done so much to boost his stock that he didn't need to. So a lot of executives are getting really high, and scouts are getting really high on what Kyle McCord's doing. And I think there's a good chance Kyle McCord, like, in relation to the Seahawks, I'm not taking, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward into the conversation, but he's pushing himself up into the range of, like, on the board of the top 5 quarterbacks Seattle could take. He's getting up there with Will Howard and, Jackson Dart, we talked about a little bit on this, and McCord are basically the top 3 guys. I like Tyler Shuck as another one, as a guy you get later on from Louisville. And then the 2 guys I have, and I posted on my Twitter as well, the 2 guys I have that are basically like a split at round, like guy 5 that Seattle could look at, were Quinn Ewers and Jalen Milroe. Like, I need to see what Quinn does in the combine to see. Milroe struggled a lot in Senior Bowl, but for me, the top 3 guys right now are Dart, Howard, and McCord, and it's an ever-changing move.
Nice. Yeah. Does Clint use of center calling protection speed up the offensive play calling? Hawks had success when they played fast. I mean, Clint makes it easier on the QBs, right? He plays quick. When you address the center.
Yeah, so with the center calling positions, guys, it does speed it up for the quarterback, because the quarterback's eyes now really just go linebacker to defensive backfield in the secondary. He's really looking more at the coverages at that point in the quarterback than he is worrying about getting the run protection or pass protection set. That's more set on the center. So you're cutting the quarterback's job in half, in theory. And in some aspects, the reason most of these NFL teams have gone to this system and why this system has become so loved in the NFL is because for these quarterbacks coming out of college, it's taking something off their plate. They're not having to learn protections right away. That's why you're seeing guys like a Brock Purdy and some of these younger guys that play in this system early on have success right away, is because they can focus on only half of what their job is. But then this also leads to limitations with this offense, is as you get into more situations where you get veteran quarterbacks, they want to have more control over how the offense functions. And that's where you start to see things change, like McVay's changed things in LA because of Matthew Stafford being there and not Jared Goff.
Yeah, and guys, like if you missed it earlier, that Clint was there as the for the Niners when Brock had a Pro Bowl year, so and led the league in passer rating. So there's a, like, to your point, where coming out of school and making their lives a little easier, um, worked well for him. Let's take one or two more. Here's
one.
well, there you go.
Old school Seahawk, great to see you in here, man. And like he says right here, and I think it's a very true thing, it's the NFL. Someone will reach for a QB too early. I think that's going to be exactly
that's probably going to
the
happen the first two picks.
Yep, agreed.
First couple picks. Those are that probably reaching early right at the beginning of the NFL draft.
It'll be interesting because Mike Mayock was on. I think he was either on. I'm pretty sure it was Rich Eisen's show. I could be wrong. And they asked him what he thought about Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and he said he liked both of them. But he said if they were to be in last year's draft class, they would be talking to them as like quarterback 6 or quarterback 7.
Oh, exactly.
They weren't even going to break the top 5 for the quarterback.
Is there a draft that is never? Have we seen a draft where no one reaches for quarterback early? Like I mean, really? Where did Kenny?
I think you could say last year's draft is where a lot of those teams took guys. Like, yes, JJ got hurt, but you look like Caleb Williams went into a pretty rough situation in Chicago. I think he's going to be fine. Jaden Daniels, you look at what he did with Washington. Michael Penix, when he finally got to play for Atlanta, started to turn it on. Bo Nix in Denver this year did really well, got them back into the playoffs. JJ obviously got hurt, but I think last year's probably one of the very few years you could look at and say, yeah, I don't know if anybody really reached for a quarterback. They got some really good players. And like I've heard people say, like if JJ McCarthy was coming out this year, he'd be QB1 and it wouldn't even be close. So
yeah, for sure.
We talk about different draft classes for quarterbacks that have been super successful. The big one that everyone always goes back to is 83. We had Marino and Elway and all those guys. 2012 was pretty good at a point. You had Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck, RG3. Yes, injuries ruined 2 of those guys' careers, but it was still a pretty good class. And that was usually the class everyone compared 83 to. I think last year's class will be the class that ends up actually being compared to the 1983 class because of the level of quarterbacks that came out of there. Like you looked at Senior Bowl last year with Nix and Penix and all these guys down there. Like it was different than even this year's. And that's not saying this is a horrible quarterback class. I think expectations need to be tempered with quarterback classes when you go and evaluate them, as in, what are these quarterbacks being asked to do when they come into the NFL? If you're looking for a franchise savior, no, it's not the class for that. But if you're looking for guys that you can come in, develop, and turn into plus starters in the NFL, there's definitely at least 3 or 4 guys in this class that can do that. You're just not spending a first-round pick on them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. It's going to be interesting to evaluate last year's draft because, I agree. There's a lot of good guys. But, yeah, I can't wait, man. The OC search is over. We're talking free agency now. We're talking a little draft. It's just rolling. We're probably going to hear stuff coming up. Geno stuff's going to start brewing hard real soon. That's going to come up quick. So, man, there's just not a shortage of stuff to talk about. Guys, Wednesday, make sure you tune in. We have Michael Thompson coming up for the 12th Man Rising. So you want to make sure you're ready to tune in for that one. And then back again with Pulse of the Hawks with Boogie Alexander. So we just got stuff coming up all off season. We're going to have some great guests coming on along the way. So make sure you sub to the channel, hit the notification bell as well so you know when the live shows come up. Because we're on taking questions, interacting with you guys. So it's all good. Any closing thoughts, Bryce?
Honestly, man, I'm excited. The off season's here. I get to do a lot more deep dive into Senior Bowl. I know me and Dan Viens are going to have a few shows over on the Pick Is In channel. So guys, come over there, our NFL draft channel, where we talk all things NFL draft. And then, we got Michael Thompson coming back on Wednesday. It'll be fun. And maybe a few other shows this week that might pop up depending on schedules for me and Ryan. And then, in another week or 2, we got Mookie Alexander back with potentially a cool announcement. So, awesome. Guys. So that's it for today.
That's it. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.